My thanks to the principal, Dr. Preeti, to the head of the department, Dr. Vinod, and Manu Prakash, Manu sir, for the invite. And thank you to all of you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be able to talk on this topic, because the demonic is something that is close to my heart, in the sense it's a research interest, and not many places would be interested in hosting a talk, an academic talk on the demonic, and that's why I said it's a pleasure. Although I would be speaking on the demonic, it's not the metaphysical aspect of the demonic that we would be engaging with today, rather another perspective on the demonic, which emerges from Søren Kierkegaard's philosophy. The title of my talk is Dread and the Demonic, and I will be talking today. Exclusively from the perspective that is developed in Søren Kierkegaard's book, The Concept of Anxiety. Now, the term, can we switch this slide? Yeah. The term dread is actually a mistranslation. The real word should be, that was used in the original, should have been translated as anxiety. But I am sticking with dread because it goes along with the demonic, dread and the demonic. There was an earlier translation of the same book, The Concept of Anxiety, and it was called The Concept of Dread. But I will be quoting extensively from The Concept of Anxiety. Søren Kierkegaard lived from 1813 to 1855. He is generally known as the father of existentialism. I wouldn't be going into the other areas of his philosophical pursuit and his philosophical engagements. I would be restricting myself to just two tropes. One is dread, the other is the demonic, and further from that I will be talking about exorcism. Now, exorcism not from a religious and a spiritual point of view, but rather as a response that Søren Kierkegaard posits to this problem of the demonic, which comes from dread. So that's the link that I'm trying to trace. There will be three parts to this lecture. One, the first part, first 10-15 minutes, we'll be talking about dread, and then we'll go into the demonic, and finally, to wind it up, we'll be looking at Kierkegaard's response to the notion of the demonic. As we proceed, I will be referring to other theoreticians, whose theoreticians and psychoanalysts, whose ideas, some of the ideas that they have propounded, seem to go along with Kierkegaard's ideas. Given there are four books, Concept of Anxiety, which I will be limiting myself to today, 1844, Sickness unto Death, Fear and Trembling. Actually, these three texts are interlinked because of the themes that they deal with, and either or is generally considered to be his masterpiece, his magnum opus, his tour de force. Now, going on to talk about dread or anxiety. Before we try and understand what dread really is, let's look at what Kierkegaard says about the formation of dread, the emergence of dread, what gives rise to dread, what begets dread, how is dread formed, dread or anxiety. In the book Concept of Anxiety, I've given the page numbers there so that you can go home and perhaps if you want to check, you could. He says dread is begotten by nothing. Dread is begotten by nothing. Anxiety is about nothing. So when you're anxious about nothing, the question that he seems to be asking is, when you're anxious about nothing, what are you? Are you anxious or are you not anxious? I can repeat that for you so that you will register it. When you say you are anxious about nothing, are you anxious or are you not anxious? Now, this is the paradigm that he uses to further his thought. For Kierkegaard, anxiety is about nothing. In other words, nothing begets anxiety. So what does that mean? Does it mean nothing gives birth to anxiety, or nothing causes anxiety? That's again a play that Kierkegaard engages in, because both the senses are valid for Kierkegaard. You should be anxious about nothing. Does that mean you should be anxious or you should not be anxious? Nothing causes anxiety. What does it mean? Does it mean nothing causes anxiety or nothing causes anxiety? So the question basically is, are you anxious? And Kierkegaard says, yes. For Kierkegaard, anxiety or dread is the pristine, the original status of a natural human being. But he says it can be latent. You may be unaware of it. If you say right now you are not anxious, if you say right now you are anxious about nothing, well, you've said it already. What have you said? I'm anxious about nothing. That's what you've said. You are anxious. So this is the game that Kierkegaard plays with. The game with the phrase, the way he coins the phrase, which means both you are anxious and you are not anxious. There is the presence of anxiety and there is the absence of anxiety. You are anxious because you are not anxious because you are anxious. Now, what would that mean? What would that really mean? It means exactly what it means. You are anxious. There is no natural human being who is not anxious. So, it's nothing that causes anxiety. Imagine if somebody were to draw your attention to him or her, and you look at that person, and the person says, "Nulla," and then you keep looking and says, "Nulla," and then you ask, "Huh? Nothing." But he keeps looking, and he says, "Nothing." There is nothing, and that's why you are anxious. There is nothing, that is why you are anxious. If there is something, it's not anxiety. Kierkegaard says it's fear. It's for fear that you need a something. Anxiety is greater than fear. Anxiety is ontological. Sattavaramana. Adu sannidhyaparamana. It's a presence. It is present. If you are present, it is present too. And so, when somebody says, "Onnilla," that's why you should be anxious. ഒന്നുമില്ലാത്തതുകൊണ്ടാണ് anxious ആകുന്നത്. And so this is the game that Kierkegaard plays, throughout the text, and it's an interesting game because it's from here that he goes into the demonic. Imagine you heard a sound somewhere here, a boom, and then you come here and you you look to see what happened there. If you see something, you'll be at peace. Why? Because you are able to do something about that something. But if you see nothing, that's going to cause anxiety. That nothing is going to grip you. The something you could leave there, but the nothing you will take with you, and after some time the nothing will start to take you. That's the dread that Kierkegaard is trying to explain. So it's different from fear. It's also different from the general anxiety that people talk about. In psychiatry or in psychology, they talk about anxiety, and it's when they refer to anxiety, it's generally just about the possibility of something. You're anxious about the possibility of something. Yesterday, probably the whole of Kerala, students in Kerala, they were anxiously waiting for what the collector would say in his Facebook page. You're not guilty, because I was waking up, I was awake till 12 and checking the page. Is that anxiety? Anxiety about today's program? Well, that's one kind of anxiety. But that's not at all the anxiety that Kierkegaard is trying to talk about here. That's one kind of anxiety, but Kierkegaard's anxiety is deeper than that. It's actually the presence of nothing. That's why Kierkegaard would say, dread is the possibility of possibility. The anxiety that we discussed earlier is the possibility of a holiday, the possibility of rain. But what Kierkegaard is trying to posit here is a possibility of a possibility. സാധ്യതയുണ്ടാവുക എന്നുള്ള ഒരു സാധ്യത. And that's what he calls freedom. The possibility of the possibility to do something. In other words, the possibility of the ability to do something. നിങ്ങൾക്കൊന്ന് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും, ഒന്ന് സംഭവിക്കാൻ സാധിക്കും എന്നുള്ളതിൻ്റെ സാധ്യതയാണ് യഥാർത്ഥ സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യം. That is the freedom that he's talking about. And so this kind of freedom causes anxiety. It's the anxiety caused by the possibility of a possibility that Kierkegaard is talking about. That is what grips all normal human beings. And I've already mentioned earlier, you may not be aware of it. Because Kierkegaard says it's impossible for a normal human being to exist without anxiety. For Kierkegaard, if you exist, you are anxious. It's just that you are not aware of this anxiety. Because you are constantly conscious of the possibility, of the possibility, of the possibility, of the possibility, and it goes on. So it's not just the possibility of something, it is the possibility of 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 the possibility, infinity of something. This is what Kierkegaard is talking about. And now you understand what's the gravity of this idea of anxiety for Kierkegaard. It's not just a mere thought about, is it going to rain tomorrow? No. It's beyond that. And for Kierkegaard, in many ways, your existence is proven by this anxiety. You exist, therefore you are anxious. So René Descartes, wasn't it René Descartes who said, I think, therefore I am. Ergo cogito sum. I think, therefore I am. Perhaps 200 years later, almost 200 years later, Kierkegaard would have said, or would have loved to say, I'm anxious, therefore I exist. I'm anxious, therefore I exist. Do you think that your cat at home, if you have a cat, is anxious about anything? Do you think your pet dog can be anxious about something? No, because they are animals. It's only a human being who can be anxious, and therefore your being a human being predicates this dread. So I'm talking about something, not I, Kierkegaard is talking about something that is so close to your spirit, so close to you. So it's not just an anxiety about what is going to happen next. No, it goes beyond that. It is your existence. This anxiety is a possibility of a possibility of a possibility, and it can go on. And so this anxiety is about the future, not the future as in future tense, tomorrow, 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 and tomorrow, and tomorrow, as you have it in Hamlet. Is it in Hamlet? Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. That's an anxiety. That's why Kierkegaard, when he talks about anxiety, he talks about Hamlet too. He's anxious. What's his anxiety? It goes beyond what he's seeing. It's about nothing. It's about nothing. We'll come to that. And so this anxiety is about the future, the possibility of a possibility of a possibility, and therefore you could say this anxiety is about the not yet. It's an anxiety about the not yet. So we spoke about two things that generate anxiety. One is it's nothing. Second is the possibility of possibility or freedom, which again is not yet, and therefore it is nothing. And therefore we come back to the first statement, nothing begets anxiety. So we've seen what causes anxiety. What exactly is anxiety? We've seen what causes anxiety, but what exactly is anxiety? It's a very simple statement that he gives there. If you read it there on page 22, a very straightforward, simple statement is not. Anxiety is the sympathetic antipathy and the antipathetic sympathy. മനസ്സിലായില്ലേ? അതാണത്. Anxiety is the sympathetic antipathy and the antipathetic sympathy. It's very simple. Okay, that's what it is. It simply means it's to like with dislike and to dislike with like. That's anxiety. There is a simultaneity there in this anxiety. This is a basic simultaneity in every human being, in every natural man. And this is always present, where you like to dislike and you dislike to like. Where you like with dislike and you dislike with like. ഞാൻ ചോദിച്ചോട്ടെ, നിങ്ങളുടെ ജീവിതത്തിൽ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഏറ്റവും ഇഷ്ടമുള്ള ആളെ തന്നെയല്ലേ നമുക്ക് ഏറ്റവും ഇഷ്ടമല്ലായ്മയും ഉണ്ടാവുക? ആ അമ്മ, ആ സ്ത്രീ, that woman called mother. ഫ്രോയിഡിനെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് മദർ അല്ലായിരുന്നു പ്രശ്നം, ഫാദർ ആയിരുന്നു പ്രശ്നം. See, this is anxiety. You can't help it. You have to like with dislike and dislike with like. and you can't escape this anxiety. You can not love this anxiety enough because you have to flee from it. You can't flee from this anxiety enough because you are in love with this anxiety. That's why we saw earlier, this anxiety and your existence is. You are, therefore you are anxious. You're anxious, therefore you are. Are you anxious now? You may not feel it, but believe you me, you are. Now the anxiety is about what that anxiety is. And so it goes on. It's not easy, is it? It's like, so we've looked at what begets anxiety, and we've seen how it's nothing that begets anxiety. This freedom is not yet, and so it's nothing. That's what births anxiety. We've also seen that anxiety is the liking with dislike and the dislike with like. Before he talks about all these ideas, he begins with Adam and Eve. Kierkegaard was a theologian as well. So he begins from the book of Genesis. And I hope you're familiar with the events there. God puts Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and he gives them freedom. He gives them freedom to eat anything, eat from all the trees but one. But that tree that gives the knowledge of good and evil. So that's the prohibition. Do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now you should understand, this is the first man. He will get the knowledge of good and evil if he eats from the tree. So right now, when he is asked not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he doesn't know what good and evil is. So he doesn't know what he does not know. I'll say that one more time. He doesn't know what he does not know. He doesn't know what are the things that he does not know. You see, there are 4 states for a human being. When you know what you know, that's comfortable. When you know what you know, it's comfortable, it's safety. Then there is a state where when you know what you don't know, that's also good, to know what you don't know. Then there is a state which is when you don't know what you know. That's also fine, because you know, it's just that you don't know. But the most dangerous state is when you don't know what you don't know. നിങ്ങൾക്കറിയാത്തതെന്താണെന്ന് പോലും നിങ്ങൾക്കറിഞ്ഞുകൂടാ. ഭീകരാവസ്ഥയാണ് അത് ജനിപ്പിക്കുന്ന ആൻസൈറ്റി. When you don't know what you don't know. That was what Adam was facing here. When there was a prohibition to eat from, he was prohibited from eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He doesn't even know what that prohibition entailed. He doesn't even know what he did not know. He didn't know what the things were that he would know after he ate, but now he does not know what he would know. Look at the kind of anxiety that it would generate. That was where Adam was. But then this prohibition gives rise to a desire. The moment you say no, there is a desire. Don't do this. Okay, now we want to do it. That was Adam. It generated a desire in him. And this desire was giving him the possibility of freedom, of knowing what he did not know. So that's where it starts. Now what does it mean? It's like, this means anxiety. This possibility of knowing what you don't know generates anxiety. And how is that anxiety generated? Because of a desire to know. because of a desire to use this freedom. That's where Adam was. He didn't know good and evil, but he ate and then he knew good and evil. After that, now we know what good and evil is. Don't we know what good and evil is? Yeah, we know what good and evil is. Not really. Not really. Because now our problem is, Adam's problem was he didn't know what good was, he didn't know what evil was. It's just ignorance. He didn't know what he didn't know. But what is our problem? Our problem is we know what is good. We know what is evil. But the problem is we don't know whether what we know as good is really good and what we know as evil is really evil. With Adam, it was okay. It was just that he didn't know what was good and evil. But your problem is serious. Because now you know what is good and you know what is evil, but you don't know whether what you know as good is really good or evil, and what you know as evil is really evil or good. Are you with me? Don't blame me. This is Kierkegaard. I didn't make this up. It's all there in that text, Concept of Anxiety. Be anxious enough to go and read the text. That makes life meaningful. In a different way, of course. I can explain this. What color is Rose Ma'am's churidar? I can see blue here. Okay, are we agreed it's blue? Okay, let's just agree it's blue. Everybody is agreed on that. It's blue. It's blue. It's blue. Everybody knows it's blue. That's nice. It's blue. നമ്മളെല്ലാം പറഞ്ഞു ശരിയാണ്. പക്ഷേ how can I be sure that you are seeing blue and calling it blue and not seeing black and calling it blue? And how can you be sure that I am not seeing green and calling it blue? Can you be sure about that? Can you? This is anxiety. ഇങ്ങനൊന്നും ചിന്തിച്ചാൽ കുഴപ്പമില്ല, ചിന്തിച്ചാൽ കുഴപ്പമാണ്, ചിന്തിക്കണ്ടേ? I hope you got this. That is our problem. We know what is good, we know what is evil, but then the problem that we have different from Adam is, yeah. Yeah, I'll come to that. Yeah, I got the question. Anxiety അവിടെയാണോ ഇവിടെയാണോ എന്നുള്ളത് അല്ലേ? ഈ ഒരു കളറിൻ്റെ ഇഷ്യൂലാണോ അത് ചോദിച്ചത്? പൊതുവെ ആ, കാണുന്ന ആൾക്കോ അപ്പുറത്തെ ആൾക്കോ എന്നുള്ളതല്ല ചോദ്യം. എല്ലാവർക്കും ഉണ്ട് എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. നിങ്ങൾ കണ്ടാലും ഇല്ലെങ്കിലും നിങ്ങൾക്കുണ്ട് എന്നുള്ളതാണ് കിർക്കെഗോറിൻ്റെ പരികല്പന. നമുക്കതിനോട് യോജിക്കാം, വിയോജിക്കാം. എനിക്ക് വിയോജിപ്പുകളുണ്ട്. വിയോജിപ്പുകളോടുകൂടെയാണ് ഞാൻ കിർക്കെഗോർ പറയുന്നത് കേട്ടോ. So I said this is not my position, it's a proposition. I hope, മാഷെ, ഞാൻ ഉത്തരം പറഞ്ഞോ? ചോദ്യത്തിന് ഉത്തരം കിട്ടിയോ? ആവാം, വിരോധമില്ല, നോ പ്രോബ്ലം. പക്ഷെ എന്തായിരുന്നാലും നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ബോധ്യം ഉണ്ടെങ്കിലും ഇല്ലെങ്കിലും നിങ്ങൾ ആൻഷ്യസ് ആണ്. So this is a problem about evil and good. You know what evil is, you know what good is, but you really don't know whether what you know as evil is evil. Can it not be good? And whether what you know as good is good, could it not be evil? That's not Adam's problem, that's our problem. I wish to take a digression from there I just want to tell you something about Lacan, Jacques Lacan. Next slide. Yeah, Jacques Lacan. Because it's not just a 19th century theologian or a philosopher who spoke about this kind of dread. The 20th century psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan has also spoken about it. We see it in most of his writings. He talks about this idea of anxiety, but specifically here I'm talking about the ideas that he develops in his seminar, the 4 fundamental concepts of psychoanalysis. Now, there he says, for Freud, if you're familiar with Freud, for Freud, anxiety is associated with the loss of an object. It could be a trauma or it could be a possible loss. Freud calls it signal anxiety, the possible loss. I'm not talking about Freud here, I'm talking about Jacques Lacan here. Now, for Jacques Lacan, anxiety or dread is not about the loss of an object, it's about the loss of the desire for the object. That's what causes anxiety. So it's nothing, again, that causes anxiety for Lacan. As we saw earlier, anxiety is the sympathetic antipathy and antipathetic sympathy. In other words, liking with dislike and dislike with like. That's exactly what the psychoanalyst Lacan also says almost 200 years later. With no reference to Kierkegaard, the psychoanalyst says this is exactly what causes anxiety. And he uses a whole set of different ideas and terms. He uses the notion of desire. Now, what happens when you desire an object? This is important. What happens when you desire an object? What is desire? Is there something called desire? Lacan would say desire is the desire of the other. That's also very simple, is it not? Desire is the desire of the other. Now, does he mean desire is the desire for what the other desires? Number one. Number two, does he mean desire is the desire for the other? Number two. Or does he mean desire is the desire to have the desire of the other? Which would mean desire is to be desired by the other. Which of these is desire? Anxiety. This is why desire causes anxiety. And he goes on to say, when you desire, you are not really aiming at getting what you desire. You are aiming at, stay with me here, Lacan says when you desire, you are not really aiming at getting what you desire. You are aiming at not getting what you desire, so that you can go on desiring. So the aim of desire is not to get what you desire, but to go on desiring. Am I making myself clear? I can explain. When you desire, you're looking for something more than what you desire. You're not looking for what you desire, but you're looking for something more than what you desire. Slavoj Žižek, the theoretician. Pardon me? Yeah, it could be something less also. Less pain, yeah. But what Lacan says is that less is also more. It's more than what it is. Even if it's less or more, it's beyond what is. മനസ്സിലായി? നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഉള്ളതിനേക്കാൾ കൂടുതലായിരുന്നാലും കുറവായാലും ഉള്ളതിനേക്കാൾ വ്യത്യസ്തമാണ്. ആ വ്യത്യസ്തതയാണ് സംതിങ് മോർ ദാൻ വാട്ട് യു ഡിസയർ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. അത് മോറും ആകാം കുറവും ആകാം. യു റൈറ്റ്. നിങ്ങൾ ഈ മറ്റേ ജിഷേക്കിൻ്റെ ഉദാഹരണമാണ് ഞാൻ എടുക്കുന്നത്, എൻ്റെതല്ല. ഇത് ഞാൻ ഈ പറയുന്ന ഒന്നും എൻ്റെതല്ല. ജിഷേക്കിൻ്റെ ഉദാഹരണം ഇതാണ്. കിൻഡർ ജോയ് കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ടോ? കിൻഡർ ജോയ് മറ്റേ ചോക്ലേറ്റ്. എന്തിനാ കിൻഡർ ജോയ് മേടിക്കുന്നത്? വൈ ഡു യു ഡിസൈർ കിൻഡർ ജോയ്? It is not for Kinder Joy that you desire Kinder Joy. It is for it is not for chocolate that you desire chocolate. It is for something that is not chocolatey that you desire that chocolate. So actually what you desire is not what you desire. You don't desire what you desire. So the moment you get it, you don't want it. The moment you get Kinder Joy, you don't want Kinder Joy, you want the toy. It's not joy, it's toy. Kinder toy. The joy is just an excuse. I hope this is clear. So, while Lima and I were coming to this place, we had coffee, and so we ordered coffee. I actually wanted coffee without sugar. That's how I like it. Not because I'm diabetic. It's because I like coffee. I was trying to tell her how you will avoid sugar and milk if you really like coffee. So when you have coffee with milk and sugar, it's not coffee that you like, it's the sugar in the decoction that you like. It's the milk in the decoction that you like. It's not coffee that you like. You don't really desire what you think you desire. So when you drink coffee, you don't like coffee. Yeah. Are you with me? Is this clear? Can we go ahead? Is this much clear? That's good. That's good. എനിക്കിത് ഇങ്ങനെ പറഞ്ഞ് ഫലിപ്പിക്കാൻ പറ്റുമെന്ന് എനിക്ക് സംശയം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. പക്ഷേ ഐ ഹോപ്പ് ദിസ് ഇസ് സഫിഷ്യൻ്റ്ലി ക്ലിയർ. ഇതിനൊരു ക്ലിപ്പ് ഞാൻ കാണിച്ചത്. OSO. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. ഞാൻ ഈ പറഞ്ഞതാണത്. That is not Zizek. That's Om Shanti Oshana. That's desire. Vineet wants to be with Nazriya, not because of Nazriya, but because of something more than Nazriya. He desires Nazriya not because he desires Nazriya, not because he wants Nazriya, and that goes on. So this is anxiety. Now this play, this game, it goes on. So I was just trying to explain Kierkegaard using Lacan. I'll try something more. Freud. I'll use Freud. Are you familiar with the idea of uncanny? Uncanny? Yeah. It's the idea of uncanny is the familiar becomes unfamiliar, or vice versa. The familiar becomes unfamiliar. The Heim-like familiar, homely or familiar, becomes unheimlich, unhomely. And that's why for the uncanny, it's generally associated with ghostly, spectral ideas. So when you say something is uncanny, something is making you afraid, something is causing anxiety, not fear, anxiety, when uncanny causes anxiety, what is really happening there? Okay, I can explain it this way. Imagine your best friend dies. Just imagine. Your best friend dies. You love your best friend, but your best friend dies. Your best friend was always spending time with you at your home. He or she would show up at odd hours at night even, and you would spend time together, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and then he or she would go and then come back again on the same day perhaps. So this is your best friend and you. You love your best friend, and that's why you wanted your best friend to be with you. But now the best friend has died. You still love the best friend. Do you want him to be back at odd hours? Imagine at 12 o'clock at night, your bell rings. You open the door, and lo and behold, your best friend is there. You like him. That is why you don't like him there. You like him. That is why you don't like him there. This is unheimlich. This is uncanny. This is anxiety. So I was just trying to explain Kierkegaard using some psychologists and psychoanalysts. Now coming back to Kierkegaard. So that we've explained anxiety. Now we're going into the second part of our lecture, which is demonic. Now Kierkegaard says the demonic, I've given a statement there from page 118. He says nobody talks about the demonic these days. These days means those days, 1844. Even today nobody talks about the demonic. I mean, generally in a serious way. You have the movies, you have the literature, but seriously, when somebody starts talking about the demonic, you think, oh, there is something wrong. Because everybody knows there are no. Really? Okay, now we're going to see what Kierkegaard thinks. Demonic is the anxiety about good. The page numbers are there for reference. If you are interested, you can just check. If what I'm saying is really there, you can check. It's there, believe me. The demonic is the anxiety about good. Or in other words, the anxiety about good causes demonic, or the anxiety about good is demonic. So if you're anxious, we've already seen anxiety is a basic trait of all natural human beings. You're anxious whether you like it or not. That is why you're anxious. You like it and you don't like it. And you like it and you don't. That's the basic state. Now if that's the basic state, what's wrong about being anxious about good? There is something wrong, he says. This is something that we have to overcome. Anxiety about evil is good. Anxiety about many things is good, but anxiety about good is demonic, he says. Why would he say that? Well, he explains there, the demonic in you. By the way, don't get me wrong. I'm talking about the demonic, which is a state. Kierkegaard here is talking about demonic, which is a state. He's not talking about the demonized, the possessed. No. He's talking about the demonic, which is a state in which he says all normal, natural human beings have elements of the demonic in them. Carl Gustav Jung would call it shadow, the archetype of the shadow. If you study the archetypes, the shadow, there are traces of the demonic in all natural human beings, which you need to overcome, he says. So he says this demonic has three spheres. It has the somatic, the psychic, and the pneumatic. The physical, the mental, and the metaphysical he uses the word spiritual, but I would choose to use the word metaphysical. So the physical, the mental, and the metaphysical. So these are, when you're anxious about good, when something good is around you and you're anxious about it, that's when you know you are demonic. Now check and see if there is a demonic in you. I can give you 30 seconds. I'm not saying you should see whether you are demonized. Don't even try that here, because there is nobody to help. But it's safe to check and see if you are demonic, because in every natural human being, Kierkegaard says, there are traces of the demonic. To help you out, he gives us certain characteristics. That's the next slide. He's told us what the demonic is. Now he's telling us what the characteristics of the demonic are. This might help you to see if there is something, if there is the demonic state in you. The first one he says, that's on page 126, he says the demonic is enclosing reserve, or he says it is shut-upness. It is shut-upness, where you shut yourself inside yourself. No, he's not saying where you shut yourself inside a room or inside a house. This is shut-upness. Even when you are with people, you are shut up. You are shut up. You shut yourself within yourself. That's demonic, he says, because there is no communication. Communication comes from the word common. There is no commonality. So for Kierkegaard, you could contest this, but for Kierkegaard, if you are shut up, if you have this enclosing reserve within you, when something good comes, you are reclusive, you are demonic. And it's there that he talks about Hamlet. If you've read Hamlet, you will see there are many places where he says, give no tongue to it. He says, don't speak about it. The first scene, I think first act itself, he says to Horatio when they see the ghost, give no tongue to this. Don't speak about it. Keep it secretive. That's what the demonic is for Kierkegaard. When you are so secretive, so shut up within yourself, that's demonic. So when something good comes near you, you are suddenly shutting yourself up within yourself. That's demonic. What did Hamlet do when Ophelia came to him with all love and love letters? Get thee to the nunnery. Get thee to the nunnery. When love came, when something good came, he shut himself up. So that's why Kierkegaard quotes from Hamlet there. Hamlet is a good example for the demonic. He's not demonized. He's demonic. It's a state in which he is. By the way, we are not talking about demons here. We are talking about a state of being in which you find human beings. And Hamlet finds himself there. Secondly, he says the second characteristic of the demonic is suddenness. There is a break in continuity. It's now here, it's now not here, it's now here again, it's not here. It's very impulsive. You can't be predicted. And a very good example he gives us there is from Dr. Faustus, Mephistopheles. He makes a reference to a performance of Dr. Faustus, a ballet, where he says Mephistopheles does not walk, because in walking you have continuity. Mephistopheles just jumps and leaps, because there is a suddenness in jumping and leaping. So in that play, whenever Mephistopheles comes, it's like that, and he's there. And when he goes, he jumps out. He doesn't walk. There is a continuity there, but there is no continuity in the demonic. It's so sudden. It's so enclosed. And finally, the demonic is empty. The demonic is empty, and for that he uses Dr. Faustus again. He says Dr. Faustus is empty. And finally, he's just asking for one drop of blood. That is the gravity. That is how profoundly, or shall we say, that is how gravely empty that person was. It's this hollowness that you find within yourself. If you find that, then it's demonic. There is no content. It's nothing. The demonic is nothing. What is anxiety? Nothing. It comes from nothing. What is demonic? That's again about nothing. I'll again digress into Freud. Next slide. You could read the quotes there for yourself. I have highlighted in red some of the key words. Demons are bad and reprehensible. What? Wishes, according to Freud. Impulses that have been repressed. They're really nothing. They just wish. Wishes endengilum aano? Do wishes have a substance? No. It's nothing. That's what demons are for Freud. Again, for Jung, Carl Gustav Jung, they are eruptions. What kind of eruptions? Spontaneous eruptions. That's the suddenness that Kierkegaard spoke about. Spontaneous eruption. That's the demon. That's the demonic for Jung. And for Kierkegaard, it's the sudden. So if you find these, I've mentioned Thanatos and Shadow there. I'll not go into that. Maybe when we have the discussion, we'll get into that. I've got 10 minutes more remaining. Just moving on. From Freud, Jung, I'll also go into Derrida to talk about the demonic, because this is a different kind of ghost and spectre that we are really engaging with here. It's not a metaphysical, spiritual being that we are talking about here, albeit I have my personal opinion about metaphysical beings, which I will not share here. I'll keep that to myself. But right now we are talking about a different kind of spectre, a different kind of ghost, a different kind of phantom, a different kind of the demon. So we've seen for Kierkegaard, it's nothing. And it's the same nothing for Freud and Carl Gustav Jung. And for Derrida also, it's nothing. It's nothing. Have you read this book, Spectres of Marx, which came out in the early 90s after the dissolution of, after the Soviet Union was dissolved, after the disintegration? It's in this book that he really begins to talk about ghosts, spectres. And it's interesting, quite interesting, is it not? Whenever you want to talk about ghosts, you will have to really go back to Hamlet. When Kierkegaard wants to talk about ghosts, he has to go back to Hamlet. And when Derrida wants to talk about the metaphor of the ghost, he has to go back to Hamlet again. So Shakespeare is seminal. Without Shakespeare, how would even Derrida explain his concepts? So who's greater? You tell me. Alright, that's just a digression. In Spectres of Marx, he develops this idea of the spectre. And in the 90s, it started, and he made this term, this portmanteau term, hauntology, which is two words joined together, haunting and ontology coming together in hauntology. And there was a spectral turn in theory in the early 90s after Derrida began to speak about the ghost. Once Derrida was asked during an interview by Bernard Stiegler, I believe, he asked Derrida, to his face, Derrida was asked, do you believe in ghosts? And Derrida said, the agnostic that he was, he said, you are talking to a ghost. You are talking to a ghost. Now what does he mean by that? He meant, you see, this is an interview, and when this interview is happening, you are not looking at me really, you are looking at a mediated Derrida, a Derrida who goes through the media or through a medium. Are you really listening to my voice here right now? No. You are listening to a mediated voice. My voice is not this. You will never hear anybody's voice. Have you thought about it? Is it possible to hear anybody's voice? You can only hear noise, never voice. Are you with me? Have I lost you? Why do we say that? Because when Rajesh and I talk, there is a mediation that occurs between me and Rajesh. It could be the air, it could be the eardrum, and it's through the mediation of all these that Rajesh and I talk. How can I really be sure that there is no corruption in the air that is taking the real voice of Rajesh away from me? That's why I said we can only hear the noise. I hear the noise, but am I really hearing the voice? We'll come to that. Okay. Right, so when Derrida was asked, do you believe in ghosts? He said, you are talking to one. This is the idea of the ghost for Derrida. For him, it's an absence of a presence. That's the ghost. Anything that has an absent presence or a non-present presence or a present absence or a non-present absence is a ghost. When he talks about the ghost in Spectres of Mars, mind you, what is it? Spectres of the ghosts of Mars. And Mars did not believe. He was a materialist. But the fun here is, when he talks about a materialist, he says how this materialist, numero uno, materialist, number one, greatest of materialists, really was speaking about ghost. What was Marx talking about? Capital, money. Can you see money? Can you see money? Can you see capital? You can't see money. You can only see the currency. Because economics പഠിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളവർക്ക് അറിയാം അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു ബേസിക് ടെനറ്റ് ഇതാണ്. Money is what money does. Money is what money does. And therefore money is not. You can't see money. You can only see the currency. And that's what Marx was talking about. Something that was absent. And that is why Derrida says he was talking about ghosts. I hope you're with me. That's why in the first lines of Communist Manifesto, he had to say, a spectre is haunting Europe. And what is a spectre? A spectre of communism. And that is not yet. So what is not present, the non-presence is the ghost. And so the future, the not yet is non-present, and that is why communism is a spectre. And the capital is also not material. It's an absence actually. So Derrida says, of course, he quoted a lot of controversy because of this statement, but you should understand, this is the only way Derrida can talk. മനുഷ്യൻ സംസാരിക്കുമ്പോൾ Derrida സംസാരിക്കാൻ പറ്റുമോ? ഇല്ല. He can only talk like this. That's what makes him Derrida. And so, this is the idea of the absence. So, for Kierkegaard, the demonic is nothing. For Freud and Jung, psychoanalysts, and for others also, it's nothing again. And for Derrida, so you look at theology or theological philosophy, you look at psychology or psychoanalysis, depth psychology, or you even look at deconstruction, they're all talking about the same things. At least here, absence, and that's the ghost. The no longer and the not yet. So having finally finished our discussions on dread and the demonic, we'll conclude with, I've got 1 minute more, I'll take 5. We'll conclude with Kierkegaard's solution, his modus operandi. Exorcism is in small letters there, it's in red, because it is not the right word, and that is why I have used it. Because you can't use the right word, because there is no right word. Anyway, what there is the demonic. So how does Kierkegaard want you to deal with it? That's the question. How does Kierkegaard want you to deal with the demonic? First he says, use language. Use language. While we were coming this morning, we were discussing this. Raskolnikov and Sonia. Have you read Crime and Punishment? Have you read Crime and Punishment? If you're familiar with Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov, the protagonist, he kills 2 people. And that happens in the beginning. And one whole 400 pages novel is about, the psychological analysis of this crime. He kills 2 people, and of all the people, he has to make a confession to a prostitute, and that is Sonia. And when Sonia is with Raskolnikov, the police tries, Porfiry, the policeman and the police force, they try to get a confession out of Raskolnikov, and they are unable to do it. But here is a holy woman who happens to be a prostitute. That's a misnomer. And prostitute is the wrong word to use. It's politically incorrect these days. Let us not go into that now. We have to use some word. So it's to Sonia that he confesses. And when he makes the confession, Sonia wants him to use the language. And once he has made the confession to Sonia that he is the one who he is the one who committed the crimes, the murder, Sonia encourages him to go and make the confession in the public. And there is a beautiful, beautiful scene where this man goes to the police station. He does not go into the police station, he kneels before the police station right there in public sphere, and he vocalizes. He uses language. Raskolnikov had the demonic in him, and the only redemption that he could have was through language, through confession, and that is what Sonia asks him to do. And that's why Kierkegaard says on page 124, the word saves the individual from enclosing reserve or from shut-upness. If you feel shut up, start talking. Begin to communicate. Louis Althusser would say something similar. He uses the word interpellation. This is how ideology gets you. See, when I say ആരെ വിളിച്ച് റോട്ടിൽ കൂടെ പോവുകയാണെങ്കിലും ആരെങ്കിലും എന്ന് വിളിച്ചാൽ നോക്കും. ഷൂ എന്ന് വിളിച്ചാൽ നോക്കിപ്പോവും. സാറേ, ക്യാൻ വി പ്ലേ ദാറ്റ്? ഷൂ എന്ന് വിളിച്ചാൽ നോക്കിപ്പോവും. ഈ ഷൂ വിളിയാണ് ഒരു തരത്തിൽ എക്സോർസിസം എന്നാണ് ഞാൻ പറയുന്നത്. ഓക്കെ, ഗെറ്റിംഗ് യു ഇൻ ടു ലാംഗ്വേജ്, ഗെറ്റിംഗ് യു ടു കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേറ്റ്. യാ, പ്ലീസ്. ഷൂസെന്ന് വിളിച്ചാൽ നോക്കിപ്പോവും. That's a way of Louis Althusser, the Marxist thinker. Later he became a non-Marxist. He was too Marxist to be a Marxist, so he got out of it. He says this is interpellation. This is how ideology gets you into it. And my submission is, this is what Kierkegaard is also perhaps trying to say. Get into language. get into communication. നോക്കണം, ശൂന്ന് വിളിക്കണം, സംസാരിച്ച് തുടങ്ങണം. That's Kierkegaard. That's one way of dealing with the demonic. Second is silence. How does this go together? How does this go together? ശൂന്ന് വിളിക്കണം, സംസാരിക്കണം. മറ്റേ silence. When you're silent, the demonic will be compelled to talk, to confess. Because a man with a bad conscience cannot endure silence. Kafka has written this beautiful, very short story. The name of the story is Silence of the Sirens. Silence of the Sirens. Sirens are, mythology, sirens are known for their seductive songs. The way they seduce people is with their songs. So Ulysses, when he's traveling back, he wants to be with the sirens, but he does not want to be seduced by their songs. അതുകൊണ്ട് Ulysses എന്താ ചെയ്യുന്നത് വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ, in this story, in Kafka's story, what Ulysses does is he pours wax into his ears so that it's sealed, and so that the seductive songs of the sirens would not reach him. പക്ഷെ sirens അതൊക്കെ മേലെ, sirens പറഞ്ഞു നമ്മൾ പാടാൻ പോകുന്നില്ല. So Ulysses here was safeguarding himself against the sound. But can you safeguard yourself against silence? No way. So if you see that, it's silence. So when you read that story by Kafka, you will know how silence cannot be escaped. Silence can get you. And silence is one way of getting a person out of the demonic. The next is gaze, or the power of the eye. Kierkegaard is straightforward. He says just keep looking. I don't know, I don't understand how that could work out, but Kierkegaard says just keep looking, just stare. Maybe it's something similar to the panopticon. You know what the panopticon is? Foucault's idea. It actually gets it from Jeremy Bentham, of a prison where there could be a station where the policeman is and the prisoners are all around. Now this is the idea, there is a possibility of being looked at and not being looked at, but the issue is you don't know when you are being looked at and when you are not being looked at. So just because you have the structure there which gives you the possibility of being looked at, you will regulate yourself. So this self-regulation comes because of this look. That's the whole idea behind panopticism. How the look of somebody will discipline you, and then afterwards what happens is this look will get inside you, and therefore even if that somebody is not there, you will be self-regulated. This is an internalization of the gaze. I was just trying to understand Kierkegaard when he says when you gaze, that can discipline the demonic. Maybe in this way, using a Foucauldian digression or perhaps transgression, trying to understand Kierkegaard. And then there is disclosure and touch. Disclosure, it's something similar to confession, but in disclosure you don't need words always. It could be expression, it could be a look. Kafka writes the story again, Before the Law. Have you read that story, Before the Law? Where a man comes to the gate of the law and there is a gatekeeper there. He does not permit him to get into law. He spends years there, now he is old, and then he comes to this man and says, okay, I have one question. All these years I've been here asking you to permit me to get into the law through the gate, to have a disclosure, to open the gate. Why is it that nobody else has come? Is it only I? Am I the only one seeking for law? Then the gatekeeper says, no, other people are also seeking for law, but this gate is only for you. This gate is only for you to enter, and now I am going to close it. And now I am going to close it, which means all these years the gate was open. The gate was open. And all the time this man was sitting there and looking. So this is This is the idea of disclosure, where you can be around. Just being around will keep the gate open. It's disclosed. It's not closed. I'm playing with words here. Just being around and making a disclosure possible. That's one way of getting the person out of the demonic. And finally, touch. Derrida in his own style says touch. To touch is not to touch, is to touch. Okay? To touch is not to touch, is to touch. When you touch, he asked, തൊടുന്ന ആളാണോ തൊടുന്നത്, തൊടപ്പെടുന്ന ആളാണോ തൊടുന്നത്, അതോ രണ്ടുപേരും തൊടപ്പെടുന്നില്ലേ, അതോ രണ്ടുപേരും തൊടപ്പെടുകയാണോ? What is it? Is it the one who touches that touches, or the one who is being touched that is touched, or is it both of them are being touched, or is it that neither of them? What's happening here? Are you getting this? This is Derrida. When you touch, തൊടുമ്പോൾ ഞാൻ അവിടെ തൊടുകയാണോ അത് എന്നെ തൊടുകയാണോ? Derrida says this is a liminality for touch, and that's why he says you can touch without touching. You can touch without touching. So touch is another way for you to approach the demonic state and get some kind of salvation out of it. And this is what, when there is an emergence out of the demonic, that's why I called it exorcism, which I shouldn't have done. But what to do? I've done it already. Thank you.
ഇറക്കി വെച്ചേക്കായിരുന്നു. ഇറ്റ് വാസ് നോട്ട് ബീങ് റെക്കോർഡഡ്. ഇത് ഓഫ് ചെയ്തോ.